I'm sorry it came to this. We can't afford to ask nicely. Just remember, this is for the good of humanity.
So Legendary. What is Legendary? All I know is I've been trying to play it for 10 plus years since I tried out the demo in 2008. Now somehow magically, as tech is wont to do, I give it the annual spin, and it runs like, well, not like butter. Maybe like really curdled butter. But I'm still not really answering the question of what Legendary is, or why I or anyone else should care. And honestly, I've got no revelatory spin that somehow makes this exceedingly unknown game now incredibly important to the average game enthusiast. Yet I'm gonna ramble about it anyway, because not only is Legendary finally functioning, and I need that on video so I don't lose my mind, but I've only just realized that 3/5 of this dev's entire library are games that have taken up copious amounts of my brain space over the years. See, I started digging into Legendary when it finally decided to begin working, and something just seemed way too familiar. Like, not being haunted by the ghost of someone you knew, but maybe a lookalike ghost who you mistake for someone else for a couple years. It's got the exact same look as Turning Point, this alt-history World War II game that, just like Legendary, is completely forgotten by everyone but me and, like, maybe one other person. Turns out, it's the same devs, and looking into it further, these guys also made Lost Planet 3. So in a way, they're just at the forefront of making games no one but me wants to talk about. It's like I'm a one-man demographic category. Makes me feel special. Sadly, playing Legendary does not make me feel special. Damn it, I should have said makes me feel whatever. Okay, point is, it's not a good game. And I want to be pretty lenient here, because I actually like Turning Point quite a bit, even with its flaws. Plus, that game got worse reviews than Legendary. Also, I noticed while looking stuff up on Spark Unlimited that they're described as 100% employee-owned, or were before they closed down, which I am super into. I think they were way ahead of the curve on that one. But there's barely anything other than the general concept that I can praise. I suspect that a huge factor in Legendary turning out as unfinished as it clearly is that both Legendary and Turning Point apparently were released in 2008, meaning I guess they were making both games at the same time? Look, I'm no game dev, and I don't have the kind of experience in the industry that'd mean I get to lecture people on this. But I'm guessing if you're a small new dev, you probably don't have that experience either. Please do not do this. Do not try to push out a bunch of games at once. Unfortunately, with the way we commodify art, brand names go a long way. And if you're a relatively unknown dev, you can't afford to spread your work this thin. Someone like EA can get away with not giving a game the time and labor it needs because even if they started shooting their employees for being in a union or something, gamers would still go out and buy everything they put on the shelves. But as a smaller dev, you have to get your name on people's lips. If you make 1 or 2 games everyone talks about, then you never have to worry about whether or not your games are good ever again. Okay, I've been putting off getting into Legendary for too long now. Let's just see how this plays out. So we start right off the bat, breaking into a New York City museum with our silent protagonist Deckard, who conveniently shows off a soon-to-be primary game mechanic by doing a bypass on this keypad, which I'm sure would never ever set off all the alarms in a real museum. Apparently we're here to steal this ancient artifact, or actually I guess not, because instead Deckard's got the key to open it and is just going to open it in the museum for some reason. Like, even knowing that it's Pandora's box, yes, spoilers, it's Pandora's box, it still doesn't make any sense not to just bring the guy who wants the box, and then open it? I guess the reason is because the game wouldn't have happened then? We're getting ahead of things already. So, Deckard gets his hand ventilated while unlocking this thing, and Pandora's crate starts crackling with magic. Also, Deckard's hand seems to be different. There's something about this particular shot that just screams BioShock to me. Finally, we're now in the game, and immediately Legendary throws a curveball. Instead of doing the whole Call of Duty regenerating health mechanic almost every game from this era had, we get the ability to absorb animus energy, which I'm just going to go ahead and assume is soul gas or something? Now, the trick is that we have 2 meters, so Animus will not directly heal you unless you've either reached your Animus storage limit or by holding down the button when no Animus is nearby. Which means, because most enemies drop Animus when they die, the majority of the time you're trying to heal, Deckard is going to start sucking energy from somewhere you can't see while werewolves are clawing up your ass. It's especially annoying because of how big the delay is on channeling Animus. It slows down the pace so much because you have to fiddle around with unclear distances to trigger your different magic hand effects. This starts off mildly annoying at first, and later becomes excruciating when you begin having to deposit Animus into objectives as infinitely spawning enemies gather around you to continuously make the game think you want to absorb their souls instead of doing the objectives. If anything, this multi-contextual button becomes a bigger threat than the endless enemies. Back to where we were though, Pandora's crate decides it's time to pop off and zaps a beam of Animus through the ceiling, which I'm going to assume is bad. Someone yells at me on comms that things are bad and to get out, which seems like pretty reasonable advice.
Deckard, can you hear me? It's Vivian. What happened? There was a huge earthquake centered on the museum. Now the whole building is on fire. You've got to get out of there. Find your way outside. I'm across the street.
What we get next is an extended disaster movie sequence where everything is breaking and everyone is running around covered in blood, and it just goes on and on and on. There's something also really uncomfortable about the way the game portrays all this mass death and suffering, too. I play stuff that's way more gory and with darker themes all the time. But it's just weird in a silly game about pew-pewing mythological creatures and knocking off Illuminati grunts. Like, there's something a little too real about the way they have all these people staggering around and dying, but yet you're supposed to be going through this like it's a cool action set-piece sequence that you shouldn't think about too hard. Plenty of games, movies, and TV have really goofy elements or fantastical settings that portray scenes like this, but they actually spend the time to give it the gravity it really needs. There's nothing in this game that even comes close. The plot isn't even B-movie levels of camp, it's like a C-movie. I don't even know how that would work for a double feature showing, but whatever a C-movie would be, that's what this is. And I'm also so mad at how stupid this opening is, because I've seen the devs do better. As I mentioned before, they put out Turning Point, which has a disaster-esque opening too, except it's way better and tonally so much more consistent. Moving on, after dodging some big chickens, taking a peek at a rebel guy, and picking up a few weapons, we get our first real level. The New York subway, which really is just a less wet sewer level, so we're already getting the dregs of level design right away. And you might be noticing that Legendary's not exactly easy on the eyes. Now honestly, the modeling and textures are fine for 2008, and because I grew up with 2000's Bloom, I can look past that too. But the colors! The colors! Where did they all go? We've got blue, we've got orangish magenta. If you're a Crayola name nerd, let me know what that's called, because I'm genuinely curious. And we've got 50 million shades of gray. My god, is it ugly as it all just blurs together into this 5-month-old soup. Later on, there's a level with a little greenery, and the green is this sickly grayish green that looks like it needs a doctor. Or a botanist, I guess. Classic example of the Saving Private Ryan curse. And I am tempted to guess it's just because they use the same settings and lighting for both this and Turning Point. So we've literally got a goofy adventure about shooting mythic beasties and mustache-twirling ancient conspiracies with the art direction of a gritty war movie. Was there no saturation slider that they could crank up for this or something? What engine is this? It's Unreal Engine. Come on guys, why did you do this? The only other explanation I can think is that the devs somehow thought they were making some super serious game that this colorless grit would have fit with. But there's no way. I refuse to believe it. There's no way with this kind of writing.
The creatures seemed attracted to the biggest cities, the largest populations, almost intent on smashing the human race back into the Stone Age. Most people thought it was the end of the world.
They were wrong.
it was only the beginning.
So back in the public conveyance tubes, we get our first enemy. God, there's been so much I've needed to talk about that we're only now getting to the combat. So, like I was saying, the first enemies are these lava lizards who puke rocks at you. Their gimmick is that they infinitely spawn out of certain fire sources until you turn a valve to douse them in water. Or should I say this would be their gimmick if it weren't for the fact that there are tons of areas in this game that infinitely spawn enemies, including the lava lizards. So really their gimmick is that they're easier, because unlike other enemies you can actually destroy their spawn point. Oh hey look, it's a werewolf. Bye bye Wolfie. I guess that's the next enemy that's gonna be introduced, right? Nah, it's humans with guns, everyone's favorite mythological creature. Yeah, so I've got a game conspiracy theory that actually Aliens Colonial Marines was trying to copy Legendary. I have no proof of this, other than the fact that they do the same thing of drawing you in with a unique enemy premise. Be it the sneaky wall-crawling xenomorphs, or the ancient Greek monsters invading the modern day. Only to then just fill half the game with boring soldier grunts who make the game mechanics pointless. In this case, they don't drop animus gas when you down them, so luckily that means unlike Aliens Colonial Marines, the devs are forced to throw in monsters with the human enemies, so you can at least heal. Which means this is already better design than Gearbox pulled off. Like, if somehow a former member of the Legendary devs ends up watching this, no matter what bad things I say here, just know that you still did a better job than a AAA studio with a huge budget. So after wading through LeFay's private security force, whoever that is, we finally get to the werewolf warehouse, where they very politely wait one at a time to attack. Now the werewolf gimmick is that they will infinitely resurrect unless you remove their head. So in a game with tons of sections with infinitely spawning enemies, right after encountering a different monster type whose gimmick is infinitely respawning, there is a new monster type whose gimmick revolves around them infinitely respawning. Great, fantastic, and guess what? Just like how the lava lizards get their gimmick softened by the game design, so do the werewolves. Once you get decent weapons, you pretty much accidentally blast their heads off before they even hit the ground as long as your aim is okay. And if not, you just tap them once in the head and it comes off, which you can do as they're starting to ragdoll. Which ends up meaning I maybe had one werewolf resurrect the whole time? And even then I can't prove it because I can't even find the footage of it, so maybe it was actually just some dream I had. Thus, in practice, the werewolves have no gimmick. Back in the warehouse, after getting embarrassingly stuck because, like a dog, I failed to properly look up, we find the person who's been talking to us this whole time on the comms, Vivian, and finally get to see this Mr. LeFay, who has been ruining the game with goons. And of course this means it's time to fight more gun grunts, this time with some friendly gun grunts helping us. This is basically just turning into some bootlegged Call of Duty, which honestly kind of makes sense considering the first game these guys made was Call of Duty Finest Hour. But no wait, these are not US soldiers. I guess the military hasn't noticed that the whole country is now filled with monsters. No, instead,
Lexington was a field commander for the Council of 98. Before LeFay abandoned me, I had more than one encounter with Lexington and the Council, as an enemy agent. Now the Council was our only hope to stop whatever plan LeFay had for Pandora's box. Lexington was reluctant to believe my sincerity, but I knew too much about Black Order operations for him to just shoot me on the spot. The signet branded on Deckard's arm also made him an invaluable piece of the puzzle, an unexplained connection to Pandora's box. So a deal was struck. Deckard and I would help the Council retrieve Pandora's box and stop LeFay's plan in exchange for safe haven with the Council. The enemy of our enemy had just become our friend.
98 what? 1998? So now there are two separate Illuminati groups introduced, and I still barely know what's going on or why. It is at this point that I am trying to figure out if there is some comic or something that this is based on, because all these characters are talking as if I missed a whole movie. Booting the game back up after finding nothing, I realized that maybe I was supposed to have clicked on the prologue slideshow option before starting the game. Now, in my defense, I've been conditioned to assume any option to play an intro is just going to roll the opening cutscene. Like how clicking on credits rolls credits, or how sitting too long on a menu in some games also rolls the opening cutscene. But to be fair to the devs, I should have checked anyway, and that's on me. So, let's take a look at what we missed.
Pandora's box, according to ancient myth, was a gift from the gods. A wedding present from a devious Zeus, delivered with the warning that it should never be opened. Of course, Pandora's curiosity proved too strong, and she peeked inside, instantly releasing all the misfortunes of mankind into the world. That was the myth. The truth, unfortunately, was far worse. The real Pandora's box was a device of incredible power. Ancient empires waged countless wars to possess it. Ultimately, a secret society called the Council of 98.
98? What? Who are you?
For centuries, the artifact remained hidden, its location lost even to the succeeding generations of the Council. In the early 21st century, treasure hunters recovered a strange relic from the ocean floor. Unable to identify its origin, they brought it to New York City for study. Although hardly a front-page story, it caught the attention of my then-employer, LeFay. His obsession with ancient history, with the origins of Pandora's box in particular, led him to recognize the true nature of the artifact. LeFay initiated a plan for our organization, the Black Order, to recover Pandora's box before the Council could react, hiring an intermediary that wasn't under their surveillance. Charles Deckard was a thief, a career criminal who sold his expertise to the highest bidder. His mercenary heart made him an unwitting pawn in LeFay's ultimate plan, a plan that did not become clear to me until I escorted Deckard to the museum holding Pandora's box, and he set in motion the events that would change the world forever.
Okay, so the only new info this actually gives us is that Vivian worked for LeFay and that Deckard is a contract thief. So we're nowhere closer to knowing anything about these groups who the plot revolves around, other than that one is old and good, and the other one is run by this asshole and bad. Like, why even bother to come up with all these conspiracies if you're not even gonna write any lore for them? I guess being completely in the dark about who any of these people are is somewhat reasonable when dealing with Illuminati-type groups, but the game gives you tons of info on all their plans and motivations, so it's almost like you get the exact opposite information that you should be getting. We're told what, we're told how, and we're told why, but all we get for who is names, and beyond that, who these people are remains a mystery for the whole game. Not even a mystery, because a mystery implies you're intended to try to figure it out, instead of just going, oh yeah, the Black Order, they sound pretty bad. Council of 98, well, they helped me out, so they're my buddies, I guess, and there's 98 of them or something. Back in the game, next level is a sewer, of course, aka it looks like every other underground bit, but now with water. There are two new enemies introduced here. You've got tentacles, whose gimmick I don't even know because they never got me, and these fairy pixie things, whose gimmick is they're invincible until right before they attack. You can make them vulnerable by doing this Animus Blast attack, but since the pixie things can't attack without opening up their defenses, it's kind of a waste of Animus energy you could be using for healing, until later in the game when things get a bit more hectic. That, and honestly, I forget I could do it most of the time, but only because I barely ever need to. Back on the streets, we've got this golem to deal with, and that means dumping our soul juice into these 3 EMP devices. They say specifically this is to power them up, not like we're using the Animus energy to hurt the golem. It's just a regular normal EMP. Makes you wonder, why these 98 guys didn't just bring a power source or something? How are they planning to do this before Deckard showed them his magic hand? This is by far the worst part of the game, because you've got to pump all these monster souls into this device and then do it 2 more times. Except the second one is also broken, and you have to go around the subway, finding all the pieces, while infinitely respawning enemies show up, and then power it on again like the first time. And then for the third one, you have to power it up while pixies are dragging it all around the skyscraper, and instant kill golem hands are trying to poke at you. None of it is hard, it's just definitely a slog, but eventually the nightmare ends and the evil is defeated. Deckard grabs Pandora's crate, and 98 guys tell us that we gotta go break into a secret Black Order lab for info. Cause I guess all 98 of them are as confused as I am about who any of these people are. No, sorry, I should correct that. The 98 tell Deckard that they can't risk letting his magic hand go on a mission, so Deckard punches his way through 98 guys to get on the helicopter about to take off for the lab. And I guess the 98 guys on the helicopter are just cool with him coming now because he proved he was tough enough by punching enough people or something? You'd think that they'd say something like, yeah, look, Deckard, you don't know how to fly a helicopter, so I'm just not gonna take off till you get off. Here we get introduced to another enemy type. Its gimmick is being annoying. I don't even need to explain this one. If you played video game, then you know exactly what this enemy type is. Eventually you make your way into town, where they've got werewolves in cages. You can let them out, but honestly their AI isn't good enough to fight more than one faction at a time. So usually they just stick with eating whoever they see first, which is probably you. Most of the rest of this level is just fighting through the same enemies. Though I will say that at least the area is a little prettier. Kinda looks a bit like a bootleg Dark Souls level. We also finally get the Griffins from the opening of the game as a fightable enemy. Their gimmick is that they're huge bullet sponges, and while the first is presented as a boss, it later just becomes a common enemy you insta-kill with the copious amounts of rockets you get. That's basically the whole level. Deckard grabs a hard drive, and it's back to the headquarters of the 98 guys. And of course, what is the point of showing off a super advanced good guy base if it doesn't immediately get destroyed? So the baddies show up and wreak havoc. That means it's up to the roof to fend off the attack, and this is when we first get those rockets I mentioned. Oh, speaking of mentioning, I almost forgot to mention that there's also a Minotaur enemy. But honestly, who cares? Its gimmick is being big and slow, you just do the Serious Sam strut to beat it. Moving on, we get a real boss this time, the Kraken. Well, I think it's a boss, but honestly I don't even know if the Kraken has a real attack because I just shot a few rockets at it and it died pretty quickly. Now we're back in New York for the final assault on LaFay's skyscraper. And I know I've been speeding up the further into the game I described, but it's time to fast forward even more. Most of the last half of Legendary has been more of the same, but usually with new and somewhat interesting environments. But now we're just at more of the same with the old New York Rebel we've already seen a ton of. Suffice to say, you and 98 guys fight your way through more busted buildings, scorched streets, and sad subways until you reach LaFay's skyscraper. Oh, I forgot to mention, LaFay kidnapped Vivian when the Kraken attacked the base of 98 guys. I have no idea why. She doesn't benefit his plans in any way. Like, I get the prologue said that she worked for him, which makes her currently a traitor, but why not just off her then? If it's a revenge thing, why keep her around? It's not like she's bait. Not only were you going to LaFay's HQ anyway, but LaFay's plans would have worked better if you didn't show up. I'm not even going to bother to try to figure that one out, because we're almost done here, and I am really ready to stop having to think about this plot. After swapping elevators a bunch and getting to the roof, it's finally final boss time. Now, there's no big new enemy to square off against. Instead, it's just a repeat of the Golem fight, except this time you just have to press 3 buttons. So I guess it's not like the Golem fight at all, except it has 3 things. Though this means the end bit is completely overshadowed by the Kraken, with that being where my brain naturally wanted the end to be. Now I will give Legendary this though. Everyone knows final boss fights are infamous for being easy compared to earlier bosses. In this case, I actually died quite a few times, so you could say that Legendary pulled off a proper end fight better than a lot of games. Look, I'm just trying to find something positive here. I mean, you know how this is gonna end. LaFay dies, Vivian saved, and roll credits on a teaser for a sequel that will never happen. And I dare reality to prove me wrong on that one. It may not sound like it, but I wanted to like this game so badly. It's not even that the game is bad enough to upset me, it's just, it lets me down at every single opportunity. I think it's such a wasted concept too. Modern technology versus mythical monsters and magic is one of those genre mixers you assume has been done a million times. But when you actually end up looking around for it, all you find is media like this, where the execution is so poorly thought through that it barely resembles what it's supposed to be. Part of me wishes I could go back in time and make sure 2008 me never touched the demo. But at the same time, I have this gut feeling that Legendary is one of those pieces of media that sticks with you longer than it has any right to. Because it's one of those examples of someone aiming higher than they can throw. I mean, it's gotta take some real confidence to try to pull off this whole massive blockbuster premise while developing another one at the same time. Especially when the tease at the end means they had a whole series planned out for this, where it looks like you were gonna start befriending the mythical monsters, or something, who knows? All I know is I still have no idea what there are 98 of. I guess in a way, because of all that, at least to me, this game will always be legendary.